9:30 a.m. here in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Welcome to Press TV's World News. Native Americans have staged a protest in the U.S. state of Minnesota against what they call the genocide in Canada. The American Indian group called IdleNoMore held a gathering at a mall in the city of Minneapolis. The protesters accused Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper of violating treaties by appropriating the land and resources of Aboriginal people. They also expressed their solidarity with Teresa Spence, who has been on a hunger strike for 3 weeks. Spence has been camping outside the Canadian Parliament ever since the government passed a budget bill that Aborigines say ignores their rights. Canadian tribes have shut down 2 highways and a railroad in order to bring attention to their plight. Well, our correspondent Joshua Blakeney joins us now from Calgary with the latest. Joshua, it's interesting that other Native American groups in North America have also caught attention of the plight of the Aboriginals in Canada. Tell us about the significance of these demonstrations.
Well, it's highly significant. I mean, evidently from the perspective of Native Americans, the division, the 49th parallel between the United States and Canada is artificial. It didn't exist prior to the inception of the United States of America and previously prior to the colonization of the American hemisphere by European countries. And so the native peoples in the United States are in solidarity with those in Canada who have risen up in very small towns and in big towns, in big cities, to oppose the Harper government's Bill C-45, which proposes the privatization effectively of Aboriginal territories. Of course, about 99% of Aboriginal territories have already been colonized and taken from the indigenous peoples of North America, but they do have Aboriginal reserves, which gives them some kind of land title and home territory. And the Harper government is ideologically opposed to any collective rights, and as a result has proposed the privatization and the abolition of indigenous rights in Canada. The Canadian Constitution purports to recognize and affirm Aboriginal and treaty rights in the third section 35 of the Canadian Constitution. It does assert that the treaty rights and Aboriginal rights are to be recognized in Canada. And so the indigenous people are arguing that the Harper government's legislation is in fact inconsistent with the supreme law of Canada. Now, the movement that has erupted is operating under the rubric of IdleNoMore. And as I say, indigenous peoples have been, and their supporters have been coming to their shopping malls and their town centers in very small towns, but also in the big cities in this country. So it's erupted from coast to coast in Canada, and now it seems to be germinating into the United States of America also.
Joshua, let's focus more on the bill that the Canadian Parliament has passed, the Bill C-45. As you called it. What are the ramifications and further repercussions that it will have for the Aboriginals there? And also, this has brought a lot of heat for the government of Stephen Harper. How has he reacted to it so far?
Yes, well, the traditional relationship in Canada between the state, so the Crown, and the Aboriginals has been one of trying to negotiate treaties, which, of course, we see in all colonial relations, Israel, Palestine, and around the world. Is it going to be the case that those who have all the power just dictate to the indigenous peoples what the terms of colonization are going to be? Or will the indigenous peoples consent to a treaty? And that was the traditional approach in Canada, which distinguished Canada from the United States, where there was overt militarized genocide, that there was going to be a treaty system in Canada. And many indigenous peoples made a treaty in good faith with the Crown, hoping that that would be respected. But it seems the Harper government doesn't want to respect these treaties, which the indigenous peoples have signed with the government, and would rather allow the mining companies, oil and gas companies, and so on, to go into indigenous territories, often buy off the leadership and despoil the resources in that area. So it really comes down to the fact that Canada is a resource superpower, and these oil and gas companies don't like it when the indigenous peoples get in the way of their lucrative profits. And the Harper government appears to be representing the interests of those mining companies and other resource companies, rather than respecting the supreme law of Canada. Because as I stated, the Canadian Constitution says it's the supreme law of Canada for the treaties to be respected. And so this is a revolutionary change in Canada's relations with its Aboriginal peoples, which is why we see the Aboriginal peoples taking to the streets and taking to their town centres en masse to protest this, along with Chief Teresa Spence's a noble hunger strike that she's engaged in, because she is from the Atawapaskat tribe, which are people living in third world conditions in a country which, as I've stated, is a resource superpower and should have first world conditions for all its people.
All right, many thanks. Our correspondent in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Joshua Blakeney. Thank you for the update, Joshua. Elsewhere, U.S. police arrest a woman